Pete, we are back to break down these fights. UFC 251 come next Saturday night from Yas Island, or, well, Sunday morning in Yas Island, but we're here for the MMA First Look. Of course, we are sponsored by SuperDraft. Pete, man, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to start going over this card. We've been waiting a long time for this, and it's finally here. Props to Dana White for pulling it off. The island looks amazing. I don't know if you guys have seen the footage of it, but if you haven't, go to his Instagram. Check out the little videos he put up of Yas Island, and I can't wait. We got some incredible matchups as well, so let's win some money.
And of course, this is not the strategy show, so a lot of this is just going to be myself and Pete kind of talking back and forth about the fights. Of course, great opportunity for you to get your questions in. Put that right there on the YouTube chat. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button. That really does help us out a lot. But Pete, obviously we're coming off last week. Cameron already in the chat saying, giving a little thanks on Kama Worthy. I will tell you, so I actually talked to Kama Worthy 2 days ago, Monday or Tuesday, whatever. I'm lost on the days at this point. And before we started going, I told Kama, I go, hey man, really appreciate it. You helped me look pretty damn smart.
No, you didn't. That's cool. He looked good in there, and Luis Pena failed to deliver. Big body type, didn't really go in there and implement some boxing, was kind of getting lit up on the feet from Kama a little bit. Got a little desperate with some takedowns, and you leave your neck out there. And I didn't realize that Kama Worthy could do that and pull off a very nice high elbow guillotine. I mean, it was pretty sweet how he hid the hands from Luis Pena from getting out of it. It was pretty nice.
Yeah, he said the one thing that he was concerned about with Luis Pena was the Darce choke. And he said, that was my one concern with him. And he said, after that first round, he goes, look, I knew he was going to go to the ground. I think his line to me was that the second round was doo-doo. And of course he goes out there. But yeah, I mean, look, last week we had a pretty good week. So I want to try to keep this train rolling here. UFC 251. Before we start kind of getting into questions, start lining those up right now on YouTube. First impressions on the salaries on SuperDraft, DraftKings, and FanDuel.
Some obvious favorites and some obvious, inflated prices, and some spots that I think we can take advantage of, and some other fighters that I probably won't be paying up for. I mean, you would expect that the 3 5-round bouts are going to be inflated based on the potential of going 5 rounds and, more points being able to accumulate and everything. So, you look at the Burns Usman fight, the Holloway Volkanovski fight, the Jan Aldo fight. Those are all fights that I think are going to be a necessity in your lineups. I mean, I think that'd be pretty difficult to avoid all of those and still take down the big $1 million prize next week rather. So interesting dynamics on this card because we're flooded with talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always talk about the difference between the salaries when it comes to DraftKings and FanDuel, and you just got to look at the main event of Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns on DK. $8,900 for Kamaru Usman, $7,300 for Gilbert Burns, but though we're on FanDuel, $22 for Kamaru Usman, $18 for Gilbert Burns. So that to me was one of my big impressions. I mean, look, if you think Gilbert Burns is going to pull off the upset, you look over on SuperDraft at 1.55 times. That's a very intriguing fighter to look at.
Yeah, if you think that any of these underdogs are going to pull it off in a 5-round spot, I mean, you can take advantage of it and spend up elsewhere and have some amazing multipliers. And I think a lot of people are going to look at Burns because you just saw what he did to Tyron Woodley. The guy looked incredible. I wasn't backing him in that fight, and he proved me wrong. Incredible standing up, and you already know that he's accomplished on the ground. A dominant grappler with some incredible submissions, going up against a guy in Kamaru Usman who has just pressure striking, but pressure wrestling, and he takes you down and just grinds you out. These two gentlemen used to train together at Hard Knocks 365 with Henry Hoof, so they know each other pretty well, and I'm seeing footage of Usman training with Gaethje, and it's pretty cool because he's getting ready for a banger of a fight, and you have Gaethje preparing for Khabib Nurmagomedov, and it's almost like the perfect storm for those guys under Trevor Whitman. So I'm initially favoring Kamaru Usman in the bout. I just think that his pressure, top game, and everything, as long as he can avoid the submission attempts from Gilbert Burns, I think that he can win this fight despite the recent momentum of Gilbert Burns.
Yeah, when you think about the UFC during the pandemic, Gilbert Burns, the rise of Gilbert Burns, right as the pandemic started there, gets the knockout against Damian Maia, then the just ultra impressive performance he had against Tyron Woodley. But the thing about Kamaru Usman, and I want to pull up his numbers here, he has been a DK stud, all caps. So this is his last 3 fights. Colby Covington, 147.5 points. Woodley, 131.5 points, and 176 against Rafael Dos Anjos. In those 3 fights, significant strikes landed, 175, 141, and 130. And when you look at that fight against RDA, he had 12 takedowns. So, it's kind of like what you were just talking about there is I don't know how you can avoid not having the title fights in your lineup because they're 5-round fights. I mean, if there was maybe a title fight that I won't have a ton of shares on, will most likely be the bantamweight title fight between Jose Aldo and Peter Yan. So that's something I look at. The other salaries that stick out to me, man, how about the value of Max Holloway and Jessica Andrade, especially on DK, 7,100 for Holloway and 7,200 for Jessica Andrade. I think the fight between Volkan and Yuri is a fight that I believe will be in the optimal lineup. I don't think both guys' DNA is to finish the fight quick. So that to me, I think you're going to have to roster that fight. So that's one that sticks out to me. Over on SuperDraft, you look at Max Holloway, you look at Jessica Andrade. I mean, if you wanted to take the favorites in the title fights, I'd probably more look Peter Yan over the other two.
Yeah. So all right. So let's look at, and this is just our first look. I'm going to dive into these fights and these matchups more for next week, talking about film and all of that stuff and stats. But let's just do a quick little glance. And let's see that, in losses, how the underdogs have performed. And that can kind of give us a basis of what we can target. So if I'm looking at Gilbert Burns, he doesn't typically throw the highest volume. He did throw a decent amount against Tyron Woodley because Woodley was just a punching bag. In his loss against Michel Prazeres, he only scored 31 points. Wasn't able to secure more than 1 takedown in that bout, which I think is interesting because I don't think that he's going to be able to take Kamaru Usman down. And I think that he'll want to keep it on the feet for the most part. He probably thinks he has a striking advantage over Usman, even though Usman just pressure. I'd say the Muay Thai advantage goes to Gilbert Burns. So in losses, it's not like Burns has really showed out. Whereas if we go to the next matchup, you look at Max Holloway going up against Volkanovski. He just threw 134 significant strikes in the same bout, scoring 67 points in a loss. And if you think of what Dan Hooker did for us last week, scoring 95 or 97 points in a loss, it's possible to cash with people that don't necessarily get the W, but their price and the matchup and the style of the fight can really pay off. So especially if it's going to be on the feet. And I would say that the Holloway-Volkanovski fight's going to be on the feet for the most part. Max has good takedown defense, even though Volkanovski has some incredible takedowns. I think it's just going to be, similar to the first fight with some adjustments. He also lost a decision to Dustin Poirier and scored 91 points by throwing, listen to this, 181 significant strikes. That's just insane. This is just crazy, and I have to bring it up. He threw 290 significant strikes against Brian Ortega. That is crazy. He scored 190 points. So the volume is there for this gentleman. Whereas if you look at, say let's go to Jose Aldo here in losses, and he's on back-to-back losses, and he's only scored 29 points against Moraes and against Volkanovski 15 points. Both of those are 3-round fights, but you understand what I'm saying of throwing 60 significant strikes and 30 significant strikes. Holloway's going to be very popular because of his potential, even in a potential loss.
He might be the chalk of the card.
He could be, and I think it's not a bad play because if he goes out there and he wins, that's amazing. But I'm going to look at some stats, and I'm going to see how much damage Holloway has really absorbed over his past, say, 5 fights, because I feel like that number is pretty high. And, you can only take so many shots, Jason, and you start wondering how much that's really going to affect you. He's had wars against Dustin Poirier, now Volkanovski, his wars against Jose Aldo. Like, yes, he came out victorious, but, there are moments in there where Jose was lighting him up.
And we do want to get into the questions. Let's get into the first one here. This comes from Ty. He goes, who are your underdogs from a first look? And, look, I'm going to look at Max Holloway. Just on the betting lines right now, he is plus 165. I think you have to, even though like the Andrade Rose Namajunas fight, that's a fight where if you go back and you watch that first fight, Rose was having a lot of success in that first round. And then, of course, she gets finished there in the second round. In terms of underdogs, Yuri against Volkan is someone that I'm looking at. Outside of that, I don't think there's one that sticks off the page at me.
So I'm not initially, I'm not looking at Gilbert Burns too much. Holloway, somebody I circled as a potential guy. That's a low priced fighter that can get it done. Jose Aldo, I think, is another one, and I think the reason is based on his resume and facing tough competition, and also somewhat criticizing Peter Yan's performance against Jimmy Rivera. He did come out with a W, but there are moments in that fight where it does look like he's losing the fight, and he's behind on scorecards, in my opinion, and one knockdown saves him from losing a decision. It's an interesting fight because that Jose Aldo's best days are behind him, but that doesn't mean that he can't go out there and just, perform against Peter Yan. And he looked really, really good in his last bout against Marlon Moraes. It looked like the old Jose Aldo, the aggressive guy who was like trying to prove it, and he was angry. And perhaps that had to do with the fact they used to train with each other, and he used to somewhat big brother Marlon Moraes, and he didn't, want to lose that fight. But say that's not the reason. He could have found his step again. And the old Jose Aldo, if say you knew the old Jose Aldo was showing up at 6,900, Jason, that's a steal and a half.
Yeah, I mean, my one thing about Jose Aldo is more of will he implement the leg kicks that we have seen now? Joe, appreciate your donation in the super chat. He says, let's see if Jose Aldo doesn't make it till Saturday. Would Aljamain Sterling get the call right away? And if so, who would you pick between Yan and Sterling? And I think this is a great time to bring up exactly what all these fighters are going to go through. So 48 hours before their departure, they will take a COVID test. Then they will depart from international airports. They will arrive in Abu Dhabi. They will then take a second COVID test at the airport. They will then check into the hotel. They are then quarantined in that hotel until the test result comes out. Then they take a third COVID test at the hotel. Then once again, they are quarantined in that hotel. Then they'll kind of go through their fight week stuff. Then a pre-event COVID test, and then they will have the fight, and then they have to take another COVID test before they can leave Abu Dhabi. It was Pat Barry had a great line this week to Ariel Helwani. He goes, so what's so special about Fight Island if I'm stuck in a hotel room? But I mean, look, I think that once Jose Aldo gets on the flight and heads to Abu Dhabi, if you get to Abu Dhabi and you have a fight cancellation, I don't think you're going to see a new fight booked. If for some reason Aldo can't make it, I think you'll see Peter Yan, Aldo probably booked for later on, or maybe Aljamain Sterling. I just don't think, based on the protocol that the UFC has put out there, I just don't believe it's going to be physically possible for them to have a backup fighter unless they're flying them out there already. And all signs point Aljamain Sterling's not flying to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, they would have to be taking steps and measures right now as a potential fallout could happen, whereas they have reserves, like almost quarantined. So like, hey, you want to come quarantine and get tested and wait in a hotel room in case something does pop off. That's the only way I could see this happening. But talk about getting poked and prodded and, right before you fight. And hopefully you didn't take some bad shots to the nose in camp and dealing with a broken nose or whatever, because my goodness.
They do the mouth test.
Either way, right?
Because so many fighters have broken noses. I forget what fighter I was talking to, and they were telling me that. They were like, because of how many fighters have had a broken nose, or maybe they currently have a broken nose,
right?
That because they can't get the swab up far enough to where they need to go, that they're doing the mouth test.
Yeah. So, I mean, either way, right? How many times you got a gag on a stick to get cleared to fight? That's unfortunate, but I'm happy they're taking some safety measures. As far as last minute replacements, this probably won't be the card that it occurs on, like you mentioned. And I wonder how many fights are going to fall off because a cornerman, a fighter has it. Even before we get to next week, before they obviously get flown out. Because I think if they get flown out, their likelihood is that they're going to be negative, obviously.
Yeah, I know John Anik on his podcast, I was listening to it earlier today. He talked about he's flying to Vegas tomorrow. On Friday, he'll take a COVID test, quarantine for 36 hours, and then he'll head out to Yas Island for all these fight cards. But looking forward to UFC 251, of course. This show is sponsored by SuperDraft. The future of daily fantasy sports has arrived. Experience SuperDraft's exclusive game mode multiplier. Say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want and build your very own dream team. Countless lineup possibilities lets you experience daily fantasy sports the way you want. SuperDraft offers contests for PGA, NASCAR, and MMA, so you can enjoy the best of DFS all year round. Sign up for SuperDraft today using the promo code Awesemo10. That's Awesemo10, and it's $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more, and $20 total free on your first deposit of $100 or more. Download in the App Store or play at superdraft.io. SuperDraft, no limits, more winning. Now, of course, we do have a contest going on right now. All you got to do is check out the pinned tweet on the Awesemo_com Twitter handle for a chance to win an Awesemo Plus monthly pass. This gives you access to all the premium content, tools, and projections on Awesemo.com for 30 days. All you have to do is like the tweet, subscribe to the Awesemo podcast channel, and leave a 5-star review with your Awesemo username or Twitter handle. Good luck, of course. This show is also on the Awesemo podcasting channel. And speaking of the content over at Awesemo, get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for the upcoming UFC 251 DFS slate with a Awesemo Plus MMA weekly pass for $8.95. This includes full access to Awesemo's leading fighter projections, ownership projections, and the top fighter tool. There's never been a better time for MMA DFS. So step into the octagon today. And should note, next week, one of those free pieces you get up there is Pizza, the Heat Sheet, as he breaks it all down and gives you some of those great stats you want to check out for the fighters. But Pete, let's get right back into the questions. Cameron goes, they are fighting at like 3 a.m. local time, right, Cameron? You are correct. The fights will start 2 a.m. local time with their prelims. The main card will be at 6 a.m. local time, normal pay-per-view start time here in the United States of 10 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. Pacific time. I thought it was kind of interesting that Paige Van Zandt, she was doing an interview, and apparently she didn't know that she was fighting at 6 o'clock in the morning. Yes, you're fighting at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it means your main event is going to be going off around 8:30, 9 a.m. in the morning. So, that makes it very interesting on fighters. I mean, you can talk about this, Pete, as a fighter. I mean, like, you would have to change your training schedule, like, what, 2 weeks before?
At least. So anytime that I have a fight coming up, I like to emulate fight time as much as possible. I do a lot of training in the morning, but a lot of our hard training and sparring for me is at night. So I like doing night sparring because that's when you're going to fight. And you'd have to think the reverse would be for these guys is getting up super early. They're going to have to get up like at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning to start that day. So they really have to make adjustments of their schedule and their training to get used to waking up and not trying to be half asleep before you get into a fist fight, getting wrapped, warmed up. And some of these athletes' bodies will respond better than others, and some won't. I wonder how the time difference and time zone is going to affect some fighters. personal habits of waking up early or sleeping until noon or whatever, getting so much sleep. They need to make adjustments. And in a situation like this, fighting over in Abu Dhabi, if I heard that fighters are getting out there earlier than others, I would 100% favor the fighters that are out there being accustomed to the environment and the time change and everything. But this is kind of like a level playing field right now where everybody's going to be there at the same time and adjusting on the fly. So it's up to these fighters, and I'm sure they've taken into consideration. This week is important, and the past 2 weeks even. You want to do like a month, 3 or 4 weeks of getting your body adjusted to such a drastic change. And I'm sure the smarter coaches and camps have done that. Clearly, Paige VanZant hasn't. So even more of a reason that I probably will not be having Paige VanZant in my lineups. But I wonder how many other fighters are that don't know about this. It'd be quite interesting to find out.
Next up, Kevin Foley says, who has the takedown upside on the slate, if anyone?
Well, I like the guy, and he just fell out from illness or injury or whatnot. We've already had one fighter fall out, and that was Marcin Tybor's opponent. I forget his name. Alexander Romanov was his name. I liked him for takedown upside. Let me go through the fights here. I think it's obvious that Kamaru Usman, for me, the danger in that situation is, does he really want to take Gilbert Burns down and deal with the jiu-jitsu? But sometimes that's a bad matchup when you have a power wrestler facing a guy who's just slick with jiu-jitsu, especially when you're including ground and pound, where Gilbert Burns would be comfortable on his back trying to hunt for submissions, and he's getting beat up the whole time. I think you could look at Alexander Volkanovski as somebody that might need to switch it up in this second fight against Max Holloway. The leg kicks were huge against Max, but Volkanovski is known for good pocket fighting and good takedowns when he needs it. And I think he might have to go to that well a little bit more with Max making adjustments and probably trying to come out with some more aggression and volume. I would love to see Jose Aldo take Peter Yan down and try to work some jiu-jitsu, but that's probably not in his game plan at all. Jessica Andrade is another fighter that could have some huge takedown upside against Rose Namajunas. She slammed her on her head and got the TKO win last time. And she has a significant strength advantage in this fight. But before that slam, Jason mentioned she was getting lit up like a Christmas tree and was really just struggling with that range of Rose Namajunas and the speed. So that's somebody to look at as well if you really back Jessica Andrade. And I think I'll give you one more that a lot of people will be looking towards. And I don't know, I'll have to look at film, but Makwan Amirkhani is somebody that really hunts takedowns a lot as well.
Next up from Cameron, he goes, is there anyone at 13 or below that looks interesting? On another note, the fighters on quick turnarounds during the pandemic have lost almost every fight. In terms of FanDuel 13 and below. So
yeah, I don't have that up. So
I can tell you right now, because I have a fancy spreadsheet right in front of me. Jessica Andrade, she is $13. Then we got Danny Henry at $11, Roman Bogota at $12, Zalgas at $13, Mello at $10. What was interesting on FanDuel when I was putting my sheet together a little earlier, they didn't have any salaries on Martin Day or Davey Grant.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. If Danny Henry's if he can stuff takedowns, he's not a bad play. And I think that he also has some slick jiu-jitsu. Not really a fight I'll probably be targeting too much, but that's definitely somebody you can look at. I also think that Andrade, she did take Rose's best shots and kept moving forward. I don't know if you want to look at that positively or negatively, but she took some shots and ultimately got the W. But that was somewhat of a lucky win. I don't know if she could pull it off twice.
Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you do have a question, leave it right now in the YouTube chat right there. We'll get right to your question. In terms of some other topics we want to mention, ownership of where it could potentially be. I mentioned about Max Holloway, about how he could be a chalk play. I mean, look, I think when you look at these 3 title fights, we're going to have good ownership in all 3 of these title fights. The fighter that I think I'm most interested to see where their ownership will be is Amanda Rebus.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a ton of ownership for the 3 title fights. I think that's just stating the obvious. I don't think I'm really telling anybody that. But Rebus is somebody that has a ton of potential, and she's gone to the decision twice against Rena Marcos and Mackenzie Dern. Hasn't really scored the best, but she does average 90 points. The problem in this fight, right, is she's 9,500, and you have 3 title fights that are less than her, which is pretty insane. She will probably have a decently low ownership based on people just siding with the 3-rounders. I mean, siding with the 5-round fights, which I think is the way to go. Trying to target a 3-round fighter, even if she gets a first-round, win right here, Jason, right? The likelihood in the safer scenario is to target the title fights. I think that's the way to go.
Something else we should note is, over the fights at the UFC Apex, it has been a 25-foot cage. At Fight Island, aka Yaz Island, where the UFC has done events before. It's not all, it's a regular arena they've built. There was a video you saw this week. Michael Carroll, who is a head researcher for basically what was known as Fight Metrics, now it's just UFC Stats. He put out this tweet the other day, and where he looked at pre-COVID, post-COVID in terms of 25 versus 30-foot cage. So in 2020. The finishing rate in a 30-foot cage is 43.3%. In a 25-foot cage, it is 52.7%. And to kind of take a deeper dive into those numbers, pre-quarantine main card finishes were 51%. Quarantine main card finishes are 44.2%. And when you look at the preliminary card, the pre-quarantine finishes 35%. Quarantine prelim finishes 56.8%.
Yeah, so I mean, in general, it looks like the Apex, the smaller cage, does affect the outcome of fights and presses the action more. And I think it's less mental than Dana White claims. I really think that there's a physical effect, and that it does lead to more finishes, as you just spoke of. It's interesting about the main card fights that you said. But I think these quarantine fights are some of the best fights we have ever seen. And I don't know if it's because there's nothing else going on, or there's so much pressure and so many eyeballs on the sport that everybody wants to perform. So you have people overperforming and then underachieving. It's just been bangers of fights, and I cannot wait. I hope that Yas Island doesn't disappoint and there's some boring fights. But regardless, you're in the big boy cage, and I think it's going to affect some fights. And this is not where I will be leaning more wrestlers than previous cards. But if I like somebody, like for me, I already like Kamaru Usman. I like everything that I've already seen on film. I like him a lot regardless of the cage. I probably like him a lot more in the smaller cage, but I like him just regardless. And he's somebody who's going to be a staple in my lineups.
Travis has a question. He says, Paige might pull off the upset. This might be your underdog of the night. So just kind of looking at the stats of this fight, when you come to the physical stats, to take the Mike Goldberg line, it's virtually identical. Nearly the same height, 5'3" versus 5'4". So Paige has got a 1-inch height advantage there, a 1-inch reach advantage for Amanda Rebus. You look at Amanda Rebus wins against Rena Marcos, Emily Whitmire, Mackenzie Dern. When you look at Paige Van Zandt, she is coming off that win against Rachel Ostovich, losses against Clark, Watterson, Nami Yunus, and a win against Beck Rawlings. Man, it is going to be tough for me to sit there and say Paige Van Zandt is somebody I can have a lot of faith in at this point. Look, I think that the odds are this will be her last fight in the UFC. Her contract's up. I would be fairly surprised if Paige Van Zandt's next fight after UFC 251 is not in Bellator.
I agree. And I think that's her next career move. I think this is Rebus's fight. Paige, could pull it off, as any of these fighters could. I think the situation's unlikely. Amanda Rebus is way better standing up, way better on the ground. She has good judo. I just think that she's one of the names you need to be paying attention to in that 125-pound division. And it's almost like Paige has 1 foot in, 1 foot out with the organization as well. She's frustrated. Obviously, she wants to get a win regardless where she's fighting. But I think this is a nice spot for Amanda Rebus to take out a very known name in Paige Van Zandt.
Be sure to hit that thumbs up button here on YouTube. Of course, a week from tonight will be the strategy show. Then, of course, on fight day, we'll have live before lock as we'll answer all of your questions. Next Thursday will be where we just go fight by fight, break it all down. In terms of that, the preliminary card, I think it's one of those prelim cards where, Pete, you're going to have to do a lot of film study because it's not a lot of names that I think people are going to recognize because – Fight Island this is an opportunity for the UFC to get their international fighters fights. Yeah,
I think it's an undercard that I could really get behind, and some of the fights on the other cards at the Apex kind of had me a little bit like not really looking forward to it so much. And this fight card, I'm just seeing action-packed fighters, and even on the undercard from the film that I've seen, they bring it. So you even talked about, say, Vanessa Mello and Carol Rosa. Like, that's a fight that could surprise people as well. I probably won't have many shares, but it's a fight that all of these fights, you could see potential finishes occurring. And I think they did a really good job. And this is a very nice start to a nice chain of fights at Yas Island.
Yeah, when we look at the preliminary card, and one of the things that we mentioned, things talked about is fights that we're circling. Yeah. I look at the light heavyweight matchup of Volkan and Yuri. Leonardo Santos, I think, is a guy you got to look at on the preliminary card. He's been shown to be a finisher. Marcin Tybura now has a new opponent, to Action Grisham stepping up here to take the fight. Martin Day, I think my only question with him in that fight is can he get the finish?
Yeah, so if I'm first looking at this card, Martin Day, David Grant's a fight that I probably will have because I think that there's going to be a finish. And I think that David Grant has shown that he can really wilt under pressure, but he's also tough with his grappling. And we have seen Martin Day lose against his previous opponent by getting taken down and held from Ping Yuan Liu in a split decision. But as far as striking, Martin Day could literally knock out David Grant, and he looks really, really skilled on the feet. Crisp boxing, good leg kicks as well. Just seems like a really nice fighter, despite the 135-pound weight class. I think that he could get it done here for us. The female matchup at 135 pounds is interesting, and I need to do more film study, obviously. But if I'm looking, okay, and I'm going right here, and I see fantasy points, you look at, where is she? Where are we at? Mela Rosa. Okay, 125.5 fantasy points. Carol Rosa's priced up to 9,200, Jason. And I know that she's only had one fight in the UFC against Procopio, but she threw 171 significant strikes. We landed a knockdown and scored 126 fantasy points. That's crazy. So we're going to have our work cut out for us of trying to figure out which 9K options we're fading and backing. So potentially, if it stays on the feet, maybe her opponent in Vanessa Mello could be somebody to look at if it's going to be on the feet in a high striking affair. But you got nice fighters everywhere, man. Raleigh Paiva is a nice looking prospect, I'd say, at 19-3, coming off a big win against Mark De La Rosa. With a nice overhand right knockout. But I'm excited. I really am. I think this could be very, very difficult to have the optimal lineup, but we can do it.
So we always talk about the over 2.5 number in female fights.
Yeah.
Vanessa Mello and Rosa, what do you think the over 2.5 is?
Minus 400.
Minus 300.
Yeah, I figured it's close. I expect that to go the distance, but that doesn't mean she can't score well. She just scored 125 points in a decision as well, and you could be looking at somewhat of a leverage play in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Rebus and Van Zandt fight. The over 2.5 rounds is minus 145.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at let's see here, Andrade and Namajunas, the over 2.5 is minus 165.
Mm-hmm. See, that's interesting because that's a 3-round bout. So when's the last time either one of these girls have been in a 3-round fight?
Andrade and Namajunas.
Was it their last one?
This would be Namajunas.
No, because the last one, Namajunas was the champ.
Yeah, because remember they were supposed to fight back in April,
right?
Because Rose took the time off after her last fight, because of various reasons. So
3-round fight, Jason. That's interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Jessica Andrade, so this will be Jessica's first fight since losing to Weili Zhang back in April.
That was a 5-round.
August of 2019. So her last non-5-round fight would have been her knockout win against Carolina Kovacevic back in September of 2018.
That's interesting, man. So you have to think of champions going back to 3-round fights and who's going to be more you know what I mean? Like, who that is going to favor more?
Well, here's the other part.
Rose, her last one was against Michelle Waterson.
You got to wonder from Rose's aspect, is she going to be thinking about, okay, I don't want to try to get in close. I don't want to find myself, potentially to get slammed again. I think that's a part of it. You look at the Volkanovski Holloway fight. And because this is actually a point I wanted to bring up with you. The cliche we always hear in the fight game is the fighter who lost the first fight has the advantage in the second fight because they understand what they have to change. No. But what does Volkanovski change? Because
that I'll tell you firsthand, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. A lot of times, the winners, the fighter that was victorious, has that mental edge on their opponent, 100%. And I know that. As much as the losers of the previous fight want to redeem themselves and prove everybody wrong and all of that, when the title's on the line, it's a completely different story. So I think you really have to look at champions who lost the belt and how many actually reclaim the throne. Because this isn't a typical fight, Jason. This is talking about legacy. And, if anybody can do it, it's definitely Max, right? I mean, I love Max. Max is one of my favorite fighters, an incredible volume striker. But sometimes fighters just have your number, man. And that's why styles make fights. And, going up and into that fight, I didn't think Volkanovski really had a shot. I thought that Max would, coast to another victory. But I think that's what happened in that bout is he was coasting. He wasn't necessarily fighting like that do or die mentality. And I think that's what cost him a few rounds on the scorecards.
Usman Burns.
Yep.
Training part, or at least they trained obviously there in South Florida. Of course, you mentioned about Usman now being in Colorado with
Trevor Whitman,
and Gaethje and that whole crew, and Elevation's out there. Some great places to go in Colorado for training. And I heard someone else kind of talking about this. Look, we know Kamaru Usman, his wrestling abilities, but we know about Gilbert Burns and his submission abilities. That's where it becomes of how much time did these guys train together where it went to the mat? And how did that go?
I'm sure a lot. And, that's Gilbert Burns is probably a reason Kamaru Usman's so great nowadays because he has an incredible training partner. And, same thing for Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is probably really talented now because of all that hard training against Kamaru Usman. So these guys know each other really, really well. And I'm sure they've gotten the better of each other in different scenarios and circumstances. And that's probably why they both have confidence going into this bout. For me, though, stylistically, right? Somebody who's such a pressure, overpowering wrestler, they tend to succeed a little bit more against jiu-jitsu competitors because of that aggressive, as long as they can avoid the submissions, that aggressive approach of that grind. And I think that Kamaru Usman at elevation is such a scary thing, Jason. Like his pace, how many people he's broken because of that. And I think if you thought Kamaru Usman was good then, I can't wait to see him after training with Trevor Whitman, striking wise, and also with elevation behind him. The worry here would be is training so much with Trevor Whitman. Does he go out there and just try to strike and doesn't really want to deal with the dangers of Gilbert Burns on the mat?
I think about Usman's been in this position. He's been the main event of a pay-per-view. He's been in these big fights. Yes, Gilbert Burns is coming off a main event fight against Tyron Woodley, but this is a different animal. You're not fighting for the title of does that potentially get to him at some point, or does he feel like this is just another fight?
All right, so I like Gilbert Burns a lot, and I'm not going to say this because I took Tyron Woodley in the previous fight, but he looked really, really good because his opponent really wasn't doing much also. You have to take that into consideration. Like, how much did Tyron Woodley really do? Okay, he clipped Tyron Woodley and dropped him and followed up some amazing ground and pound and pressure and then just outclassed him every single round. But if you look at Tyron Woodley historically, he's not such a volume type of fighter where he throws and he's in your face all the time. He's that type of counter striker against the cage, like we spoke about, looking to land that one shot. So Gilbert Burns, that was not a problem to win that fight because he really didn't have to face too much adversity. How is he going to deal with somebody who's in his face, grinding and throwing shots and trying to really just make sure and put a stamp on his legacy that he's one of the best fighters of all time? I really feel like Kamaru Usman is at that next level of elite for the division. And I think he's going to give Gilbert Burns a much more difficult fight than Tyron Woodley did, obviously.
All right, let's look at the three underdogs in the title fights.
Okay.
So Gilbert Burns, Max Holloway, Jose Aldo. So let's first talk about the DraftKings side of things. So we got 7,300 for Burns, 7,100 for Holloway, and 6,900 for Jose Aldo. Rank them 1, 2, 3 on which ones you like the best to least.
Okay, so obviously I'm on Kamaru Usman. So Gilbert Burns is a no for me. But if you're backing him and you think he gets the submission, he could pull it off, and maybe he can do enough on the feet to win some rounds as well. The only person that would really know, or the only people that would really know how these guys match up well are training partners and people that have seen it firsthand in the sparring room. Volkanovski against Holloway, I think that's going to be the popular underdog pick is Holloway. We went over the volume and everything. I feel like Volkanovski might just have his number, though, Jason. I really feel like he might just have his number. The Peter Yan against Jose Aldo fight, I think this is one where people might be overlooking Jose Aldo because you've seen he's dropped back-to-back fights, and what's his best win lately? You can't really put your finger on it. He looked good against Jeremy Stephens, but besides that, like, when's the last time you really saw the old Jose Aldo? But in saying that, Peter Yan did struggle to beat Jimmy Rivera, and I know Jimmy Rivera is very talented and tough. And, he was behind on scorecards before some nice knockdowns. If the Jose Aldo that fought Marlon Moraes shows up, Jason, I think this is a very, very interesting fight. We've never seen Peter Yan really in bad positions or have to deal with adversity because he's just been dominating competition. But he has wins over Uriah Faber, Jimmy Rivera. It's just like maybe it's too much too soon. I mean, he has a win over Dodson, decision, win over Rivera, decision. He knocked out Faber with a weird little teep/round kick that he didn't turn his hip on, but it was dominating him besides that. So I think this might be an interesting spot to put Jose Aldo. So if I had to rank him like you're saying, I'd say for me right now, first look, I'd probably say Jose Aldo 1, Holloway 2, Burns 3.
Does it change on FanDuel because of the different pricing?
I don't have fit. What's the pricing on FanDuel?
So on Burns, you got $18.
Okay.
Holloway 16, Aldo 14.
No, I stand behind what I said. Gilbert Burns at 18. Get out of here. I'm not doing that. Jose Aldo and Holloway, I like that. So it'd be the same for me.
And then a SuperDraft, you got 1.5 times for Holloway, 1.55 for Burns, and also Aldo is at 1.55. Look, if I was going to rank them, I look at Holloway, my number 1. Burns would be my number 2. Aldo would be my number 3. I think you mentioned this a little earlier. The Volkanovski Holloway fight, we're not big on stacking fights, but if I was going to stack a fight, that's the fight of the 3 title fights I would stack.
Yeah, so let's go over stacking real quick, because if you stacked last week, it would be one of the weird scenarios where it would have worked out for you if you had the other fights correctly, obviously. And there were some weird fights and some weird outcomes. But in cash games, stacking a fight that's going to go 5 rounds that is going to be a striking affair is safe to do. So if in your mind you thought last week Dustin Poirier against Dan Hooker was going to go all 5 rounds and was going to stay on the feet the whole time, which for the most part it was, stacking that fight in cash games is a must. You need to do that because that's just a safe play to do. As far as GPP, there's usually better options because the likelihood of that working out for you are pretty slim. That's a fight. I also think the Jose Aldo Peter Yan fight, you could look at that as another bout that's going to be on the feet the whole time, and that could lead to more points than you're accustomed to. So who has the best shot at winning the fight? Jose Aldo, not talking DFS points, actually winning the fight. Jose Aldo, Holloway, or Burns?
I pick Holloway.
Okay, so my heart says Holloway, right? But my head says Aldo. And that's just right now. I have to watch film and go through it deeper and everything. But I think it's close between Holloway and Aldo. I'm not big on Burns, so it's easy for me to cross him off in this matchup against Kamaru Usman.
And Mark brings up, he says their combined score was pretty dreadful last time. And so for Volkanovski, it was 108.5. For Max Holloway, it was 67 points. Look, obviously when you're paying up at, in this case, paying up for Volkanovski at 9,100, do you want more than 108 points? Yes. But you tell me, if you sit there and said, hey, 6-7 points for a guy who's priced at 7,100, I think a lot of people would take that.
It's not bad. It's not bad at all. I mean, say Jose Aldo goes out there and gets you 75 points at 6,900. That's pretty sweet.
This is
I got to look at that matchup, man, because I wonder if Volkanovski starts to go to the takedowns more, and as much as Max can make adjustments in the fight, so can Volkanovski. Volkanovski can really make this even more difficult for Holloway. So you can't just say, oh, Max is going to make adjustments. And as the fight went on, he started to find his rhythm and get into it. And it was a close fight. It was. But Volkanovski looked pretty good with those leg kicks.
So let's look at the last time Jose Aldo went 5 rounds.
I know.
I was against Frankie Edgar back when he won the interim title. In a 5-round fight, he scored 70 points in a decision win. That is my concern with Jose Aldo, is that if he doesn't get the finish, now look, his price point is so cheap that even if he gets, 70, 80 points, okay, I'd be happy with that. As long as I've got, 5 other fighters who go out there and get me finishes. But to me, it's about, will he be active enough to score?
It's interesting. I mean, it's something to debate. You look at his fight against Chad Mendez. He threw 102 significant strikes and ended up with 97 points in the decision win. So that's a nice little, some little optimism to put aside and think of if you're going to choose him. Won a decision against Ricardo Lamas as well, 5-round decision, scored 83. If he goes out there and scores 83 at 6,900, you're happy with that. Would it be crazy to say he stops Peter Yan, though?
I would say crazy. I'd be surprised.
Okay. All right. Don't you think we're due for a Jose Aldo crazy knockout? Like, don't you think, like, the MMA gods are like, all right, it's time for Jose Aldo to go out there and show what he's capable of. Remember the flying knee against Cub Swanson in the WEC? Granted, Peter Yan is amazing, and I think that he's like the future of the division. I do. It's just Jose Aldo used to fight at 145 pounds. Now he's at 135 pounds. So, and he looked damn good in his last bout. He did lose a close decision against Marlon Moraes, but if you look at the fight, you probably scored it for Jose Aldo.
By the way, it is an indoor facility they've built over there, but I do kind of question how cold can they get in the arena. So we're doing this show. It is 7:50 Eastern time. It's 3 a.m. in Yas Island. It's 94 degrees outside.
Man, Yeah, it's interesting, man.
It's
so
hot.
many.
It's hot.
Yes, so many. So many things to take into consideration.
Bro, I live in Florida. It's hot as can be right now here. But yeah, as you mentioned, it is something to put in consideration. Of course, this is the MMA DFS First Look Show for UFC 251, and we are sponsored by SuperDraft. The future of daily fantasy sports has arrived. Experience SuperDraft's exclusive game mode multiplier. Say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want and build your very own dream team. Countless lineup possibilities let you experience daily fantasy sports the way you want. Experience SuperDraft. SuperDraft does offer contests for PGA, NASCAR, and MMA, so you can enjoy the best of DFS all year round. Sign up for SuperDraft today using the promo code Awesemo10, and it's $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more, and $20 total free on your first deposit of $100 or more. Download in the App Store or play at superdraft.io. SuperDraft, no limits, more winning. Of course, we all know that many sports may be on hiatus, but Awesemo Plus isn't. Sign up today for the Platinum Package, which includes access to all the Awesemo Plus projections, tools, and content for PGA, esports, NASCAR, MMA, soccer, and KBO baseball. You can review your membership options by clicking the Awesemo Plus tab in the upper left-hand corner of the Awesemo.com homepage. Also, be sure to follow Awesemo on Instagram and Facebook, as we'll be providing free Awesemo Plus player projections for PGA, NASCAR, MMA, and more on our Instagram page, which is at Awesemo_com, and our Awesemo Facebook page daily. So make sure to give them a follow. Of course, if you do have any questions, hit that right up there in the YouTube chat, as we will get to your questions about UFC 251. Of course, we got a lot of time to kind of break down the film and break this one down for you. Mark says, he goes, I love Jan, but there are guys that definitely have higher quality wins. Dots and Rivera are good, but neither is top five. I think this will be a much closer than the line suggests.
Yep.
I still wonder about Jose Aldo at 135, even though I saw a line today where he basically noted about it was basically easier for him to make 35 than it was 45, which
that doesn't make much sense at all. When he cut off his arm, that's interesting. But I think he might have a good team and a good nutrition program behind him, and maybe that's what he's referring to. But can you imagine if he did this earlier in his career, and like say Frankie Edgar did that as well? Like you have guys that were significantly undersized, and Jose Aldo was a big 45er, but like Frankie Edgar, significantly undersized for the 155-pound division, should have been at 135 pounds probably his whole career. 145 is a nice weight class for him as well. But if these guys did this earlier in their career, you'd be seeing a crazy run, even crazier than what they did. But it's almost like, why fix what's not broken? And he was dominating the 145-pound weight class, so why would he drop? It didn't make much sense. I'm excited, though. I can't wait.
Yeah, when Frankie was at 155, I think he basically said he walked around 156.
Yeah, I trained with Frankie, and he was. I think I was weighing more than him, and I was fighting at 145 pounds, and he's like a foot shorter than me as well. I'm like, how is this possible?
Well, can we get that cut down to 35?
I tried. I really tried. I said, heck no. The last 5 pounds are always the hardest, so that's why you see guys like just miss. But if you see a guy that misses by like 5 or 10 pounds or 4 to 10 pounds, they really didn't try.
Yeah, it's that also, I mean, it's something you brought up earlier about when fighters go over there, because I mean, look, it's a long flight.
Yeah.
How have you maintained your cut? I mean, and also I think the very key point of this is something you talked about a little earlier, is have you adjusted your training schedule based on the time that you're going to be fighting at? Just adjusting your sleep schedule to me would be maybe the hardest thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll have to be. How will you do this? You got to think of when you'd be up eating and when you'd be going to bed. So you'd probably be going to bed at what? Let's say 4 p.m. Waking up at midnight to kind of get you set. Wouldn't you agree with that? Wouldn't that make most sense?
Yeah.
I will have to creep on their social medias a little bit more and do some deeper diving and try to see as much as possible for us and watch as much film as possible. We've got a lot of time for next week. I mean, you talk about one of the best contests ever, and so many eyes are on the sport that we love so much. You have $1 million in first place. Second place even is $100,000, all the way to sixth place, which is $10,000. So you're talking about some significant money that you can win in that $25 entry for the Island Millionaire. Dude, I'm convinced. Sign me up. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's the Millionaire contest to me is always kind of fascinating based on the type of DFS player you are.
Yeah.
Are you a one lineup type person, or are you a multi lineup type person? And obviously, it all depends on your bankroll, of how much money you want to wager. But that to me is always very interesting. Mark says, he goes, is there a reliable source to see what guys actually weigh on fight night? I've seen those numbers, but don't know where they come from. I'd be interested in seeing Aldo for the Moraes fight. You see that in boxing, where they'll get weighed on fight day. In MMA, there are fight night weights that happen. Some commissions do release them. California does. California is pretty much the ones who started this, and they do release the weights. Mohegan Sun. They do it as well. They do a lot of Bellator events. They also handle all Bellator's international events. So they do the fight night weights, but there's some commissions that don't do that.
Right.
But it is something as a promotion. They more keep track of the weights during fight week. So that gives them an idea. So like when the fighter checks in, they know how much they're weighing. So they know how much weight they have to cut. So then if they know if they're at a point where it's like, okay, this guy's got to cut 30 pounds in 3 days, we may need to start talking about a contract weight fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the reason why one of the first things you do when you meet up with the promotion is the week of the fight is they have you step on the scale and they jot that down and see, if there's going to be a catch weight potential there. And also, as far as the commission wise, commissions don't want you cutting a ton of weight. And if they notice you're cutting a significant amount of weight and putting a ton of weight back on, they'll actually start to recommend you to move up a weight class following your bouts. And they don't require it for now as long as you don't miss it. But they definitely recommend it.
Lewis, appreciate the comment there in the chat. Appreciate you checking us out here. Of course, we'll be back next Thursday as we've got the strategy show. Then, of course, next Saturday, we'll have the Live Before Lock. Live Before Lock will probably be about 90 minutes before the fights are going to start, which will be when
are we gonna do that?
That would be normal. It'll be at 4:30 Eastern time.
Live. Oh, you're gonna. Okay. I'm thinking, hold on. It's for them, not us, right?
Correct. Yes.
I'm like, dude. Okay. I'm like, what time are we waking up?
You thought we were going at like midnight?
Yeah, that's why you're over here volunteering my services for Live Before Lock, bro. And I'm like, what time are we waking up? That's funny.
No, normal time for us, Pete.
Okay.
Apparently you've been sparring today.
I have
not. Mark says, did you guys cover the Tybura official change? Will he end up having extra value? Haven't had a chance to really to dive into Grisham in terms of this one. The UFC is not officially announced; it is being reported. But
some typology right now.
Well, until I get an official release from the UFC, it's not official to that point. But it is expected that's going to be the fight. Paul saying Aldo looked good in his last. He's angry too. This is the one thing about Jose Aldo is in his past couple of fights, we really haven't seen the leg kicks. And you look at Jose Aldo is not as old as we think he is. You would think he would be like 37, 38. I want to say he's 34, 35.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's taken a ton of damage in his career and actually has a history of a lot of foot and ankle injuries, which is kind of why he stayed away from leg kicks. Former soccer player as well. Like, you ever watch him play football, he's pretty damn good. But it'd be interesting if we got back to the leg kicks or even calf kicks. Can you imagine? I think that could be a nice little wrinkle in this game plan is, playing possum these past couple fights of I don't throw kicks anymore, and all of a sudden now you see the nastiest leg kicks in the game coming back. That'd be interesting. I hope he does.
But we look forward to next week, the strategy show on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific time, and of course, live versus lock. Pete, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time, buddy.
Okay, text me. Make sure. Okay, I'm Okay,
let me text you like 4:20, dude. Where are you at?
Yeah, right. All right,
but that is going to wrap it up for the MMA First Look DFS show for UFC 251. Of course, be sure to give Pete a follow on Twitter at Pete the Heat MMA. I am at Jason_Floyd, and this has been the MMA First Look show for UFC 251.